In the vast unending current of spiritual existence, every soul reaches a singular hushed moment of absolute finality and glorious beginning, a threshold we commonly call death. This transition, far from being the void of non-existence, is, as the insightful teachings of Allan Kardec reveal, the grandest invitation the spirit receives, the command to let go. Before the physical vessel succumbs to its necessary sleep, the eternal part of us is called to liberate itself from the totality of what it has acquired, cherished, or resisted on earth. This essential work of detachment spans far beyond the simple severing of material ties. It is a profound moral and emotional unburdening, a necessary purification to ensure the soul's peaceful ascent. The pain often associated with the process of disincarnation, or the spirit's separation from the body, rarely stems from the actual cessation of life itself. Instead, it arises from the deep-seated resistance to embracing this natural cycle, a stubborn refusal to let go of the familiarity, the habits and the emotional and material comforts the spirit has grown reliant upon. Kardec's observations, gathered from countless communications from the spiritual world, consistently demonstrated that the more an individual clung tenaciously to the illusions and trappings of physical life, the sound of loved ones' voices, the weight of their possessions, the comfort of their established routines, the more arduous and confused their passage became. The spirit, dwelling in the physical form, becomes accustomed to a dual reality: the tangible world that is now receding and the subtle world that is drawing it forward. This sense of being torn between two states creates a momentary paralysis. For the passage to be serene, the spirit must have already completed its moral preparation, recognizing that its sojourn on earth was merely a temporary schoolroom for development, not a permanent home for ownership. This fundamental understanding initiates the process of detachment. The soul must consciously release not only the visible chains of property and status, but, more importantly, the invisible bonds of moral flaws and emotional debts. Kardec insisted that preparing for the afterlife is the most critical purpose of our physical life, and this preparation is nothing less than moral education. It requires a profound, conscious effort to shed the ego, the pride, and the dense, heavy feelings that act as spiritual weights. Only by voluntarily disarming ourselves of these earthly anchors can we ensure that when the final call comes, the spirit will rise gently like a leaf detaching from a branch at the precise, perfect moment, ready to be guided by the light it already recognizes as its true self, leaving behind only the vessel that served its temporary needs. The relentless human impulse to accumulate and possess stands as one of the most potent spiritual tethers, forming the illusion of permanent ownership that must be entirely released before the soul can travel unimpeded. Throughout our existence, we are taught to measure success, security, and personal value by the sheer volume of things we amass: properties, wealth, honors, professional titles, and social standing, treating them as extensions of our very identity, believing implicitly that permanence is a guaranteed right. This mindset traps the soul in a cycle of striving and protecting, blinding it to the fundamental spiritual principle that everything received and experienced on earth is merely a loan from the divine, granted solely for the spirit's educational journey. The body, the familial relationships, the opportunities for labor, even the periods of deep personal suffering are all transient provisions, tools placed in our hands for temporary use and refinement. The moment of transition is a dramatic, irrefutable demonstration of this impermanence. The spirit suddenly perceives that absolutely none of the material assets it fought so hard to secure can follow it, rendering the lifetime's devotion to acquisition utterly meaningless in the face of eternity. Kardec meticulously detailed that the majority of suffering experienced by the disincarnate spirit is directly related to this tenacious clinging to the material world. The soul that lived solely to acquire and consume finds itself painfully anchored, experiencing the separation from its belongings as a literal tearing away. It may desperately hover near its former home, lamenting the loss of its fortune, its furniture, or its prestige, unable to accept that these things now belong to others. This attachment is not merely philosophical, it creates a vibrational density that impedes the spirit's ascent to lighter, more peaceful spheres. The true path to liberation, therefore, is the genuine recognition of impermanence long before death arrives, When the individual fully grasps that their physical tenure is a journey of learning and transformation rather than an opportunity for lifelong possession, their approach to living changes fundamentally. They cease the anxious drive to accumulate and instead focus on the vital work of self-transformation and spiritual enrichment. They learn to use the world's resources wisely and generously without allowing those resources to dominate their inner peace. This profound shift from demanding ownership to gratefully accepting stewardship is the essence of practical spiritual detachment, ensuring that when the hour of departure strikes, the spirit is already traveling light, unburdened by the unnecessary dead weight of a world it was only ever meant to pass through. Among the emotional anchors that most heavily weigh down the spirit preparing for its return, the corrosive force of unresolved resentment stands out as a particularly dense and tenacious chain. Resentment, grudges, and deep-seated grievances are not merely passive memories. They are highly charged, negative energetic bonds that link the departing spirit directly to the source of its pain and the circumstances of its perceived injury. The soul that dies without having genuinely forgiven remains spiritually shackled to the very event or individual that caused its suffering. In the spiritual realm, where thought and feeling create immediate reality, this rancor translates into a perpetual, agonizing reliving of the original offense. The spirit is unable to achieve the clarity necessary for rest because its focus is still outward, preoccupied with the injustice, the anger, and the desire for retribution or justification. This constant preoccupation with the past holds the spirit captive, denying it access to the higher, restorative vibrations of peace and love. Kardec's extensive reports from the spiritual plane confirmed that the energy of these bitter feelings creates a tangible spiritual nebulosity around the departing soul. This darkness obscures its vision, prevents it from recognizing its new state, and often results in intense confusion, sometimes leading spirits to remain unaware they have died. They linger, trying desperately to influence the environment of their former life, driven by the same passions and resentments they carried in life. The solution, the necessary act of liberation, is not merely to forget, but to forgive deeply and completely, a conscious act that must be completed while still incarnate. Forgiveness is the spiritual solvent that dissolves the bonds of past pain. It is a recognition that the experience, however painful, served a purpose, often to teach patience, humility, or tolerance, and that holding on to the pain only serves to punish the self. The process of forgiveness is an act of spiritual hygiene, severing the cord of negative dependency and allowing the heart to be truly free. When the spirit undertakes this profound work of cleansing, it disarms the power of the past to define its future, ensuring that the journey across the threshold is one of lightness and acceptance, rather than a troubled, repeating echo of earthly conflicts. The spirit must finally understand that the greatest prisoner of a grudge is always the one who holds it. The soul's journey is also frequently burdened by the heavy, suffocating weight of remorse and guilt, the invisible chains forged from errors left uncorrected and debts left unpaid. This is not the transient discomfort of a minor regret, but the profound spiritual agony of knowing one caused significant harm or failed a vital duty, a feeling that creates a spiritual shadow following the soul across the divide. Kardec illuminated the crucial difference between passive regret and active, transformative repentance. Merely shedding tears or feeling sorrow for one's actions is spiritually insufficient. It is only the first step. True repentance, the only kind that brings lasting peace, is the commitment to reparation, the sincere active effort, still in life, to undo the wrong, heal the damage, or failing that, to transform the self so completely that such an error becomes impossible in the future. The spirit that simply laments its mistakes without making this fundamental internal change carries those same painful self-accusations with it. And in the spiritual realm, where thought is power, these culpas manifest as intensified, continuous torment. This unrepented guilt traps the spirit in a cycle of self-punishment and inability to progress. The spirit often finds itself tethered to the very scenes of its past misdeeds, forced to relive the consequences of its choices with painful clarity. This suffering, Kardec explained, is not a punishment imposed by a wrathful God, but the inevitable, direct consequence of the soul's own internal state and the natural spiritual laws of cause and effect. The spirit is its own judge. The weight of uncorrected error creates a vibrational disharmony that simply cannot enter the serene spheres of the blessed. The only way to dissolve this agonizing internal pressure is through the transformative power of self-reconciliation. This process involves recognizing the error not as an eternal damnation, but as a severe lesson, and accepting the duty of future correction. The spirit must seek forgiveness from those it wronged, and crucially, it must grant self-forgiveness, understanding that the past cannot be altered, only learned from. The true man of good, Kardec taught, is the one who recognizes his errors while he still possesses the opportunity to correct them. By pursuing this profound moral accounting and true reparation during life, the spirit cleanses its heart, ensuring that when it arrives at the moment of passage, it faces its conscience not with crippling dread, but with serene acceptance and the lightness of debts settled. Perhaps the most deeply embedded and spiritually resistant obstacle the spirit must shed is the corrosive, multifaceted power of pride and its twin, egoism. These two sentiments are not just simple character flaws. They are, in the profound spiritual sense, the heaviest chains that bind the soul to the lower, dense vibrations of the material world, acting as a perpetual barrier to true spiritual elevation. Pride, in particular, manifests as an inflated sense of self-importance, a constant need for external recognition, superiority, and validation, which feeds the illusion that the self is somehow separate and superior to others. This fixation on personal status, the obsession with titles, social standing, and being seen as important, becomes a subtle but formidable barrier at the time of departure. The spirit that has dedicated its life to constructing and maintaining this external facade finds itself painfully disoriented when the material body and its accompanying status inevitably dissolve. Kardec emphatically taught that accumulating knowledge, religious piety, or material riches is spiritually meaningless if the individual's heart remains dominated by the iron grip of these self-centered emotions. Pride and egoism are the very forces that prevent the spirit from accessing the higher laws of love and charity, condemning it to a life of spiritual isolation and future suffering. The soul that lives purely for its own gain, its own glory, and its own self-satisfaction finds the moment of death to be a terrifying mirror reflecting only its solitude. It cannot connect with the welcoming, elevated spirits because its own vibrational state is too low, too dense, and too self-absorbed. This subtle form of vanity, the deep concern for one's image and reputation, even after death, clings to the spirit like an insidious membrane, holding it back from the light. The essential counterforce, the indispensable virtue the spirit must cultivate and internalize, is profound humility. Humility is not self-abasement. Rather, it is the clear, calm recognition of one's true place within the immense tapestry of the cosmos, an acceptance of one's own smallness before the grandeur of the divine. When the spirit achieves this genuine self-awareness, the illusion of its own importance shatters, and the oppressive power of pride and egoism instantly evaporates. The soul becomes lighter, free to traverse the spiritual veil with ease and serenity, recognized by the pure light of the higher spheres, not for its earthly titles, but for the moral simplicity of its heart. The intense, paralyzing fear of death is perhaps the most universal mental obstacle the spirit must overcome, a dread that transforms the natural, inevitable transition into an agonizing struggle against the divine plan. This fear is almost entirely rooted in ignorance, a profound misunderstanding of the actual continuity of life and the nature of the spiritual world. The incarnate individual, viewing reality solely through the narrow lens of their physical senses, perceives the afterlife as a terrifying absolute void, an abyss of nothingness, or at best an unpredictable, frightening unknown. This misconception forces the soul to cling desperately to the familiar body and the world it knows, resisting the natural cycle of renewal and change, which only serves to amplify the pain and confusion of the final moments. This resistance is a futile battle against a process that is designed for the spirit's own good. Kardec's entire philosophical structure was designed to provide the necessary antidote to this ignorance: reasoned faith. This is not a blind, sentimental belief demanding unthinking acceptance, but a conviction built upon logical evidence, observable phenomena, and continuous, verifiable experience through communication with the spirit realm. By systematically studying the narratives of those who had already passed on, Kardec demonstrated irrefutably that life not only continues, but that the spiritual life is the true, central reality, and the earthly sojourn merely a temporary developmental phase. When this intellectual and spiritual certainty takes root in the consciousness, the fear of the unknown naturally and instantly begins to dissolve. The spirit learns that the world awaiting it is not a terrible abyss, but a reflection, an exact mirror of the moral and emotional landscape it cultivated during life. The transition ceases to be a fearful leap and becomes a simple change of residence. The informed spirit understands that leaving the body is akin to shedding an old worn-out coat or waking from a restless dream. Equipped with reasoned faith, the soul approaches the final moment with a profound trust in the wisdom and benevolence of the universal laws. This transformation of perspective, from viewing death as an end to recognizing it as a return, is essential, allowing the spirit to embrace the process with calm confidence, knowing that it is simply moving from one room to the next in the eternal house of God. A deep and often unseen spiritual anchor that prevents peaceful passage is the soul's profound attachment to its constructed identity, the total sum of roles, titles, and relationships that defined its existence in the material world. We are conditioned from birth to identify ourselves by external markers. I am a successful lawyer. I am a caring mother. I am the owner of this house. I am the friend of that person. These labels are the scaffolding of our temporal personality, and when the certainty of death approaches, this entire structure begins to collapse. The spirit faces an existential crisis. Who am I when all these forms dissolve? The soul that has allowed itself to be defined solely by what it did or what it possessed feels a terrifying void, an overwhelming sense of non-existence as these external definitions are stripped away. This clinging to the personal narrative, the name, the past achievements, the public image, becomes a stubborn spiritual tether, resisting the natural dissolution of the temporary self. Kardec highlighted that this difficulty in letting go of identity is intricately linked to the human illusion of separation. On Earth, we live as seemingly isolated units, each with our unique history and challenges. However, the reality revealed at the moment of transition is one of profound interconnection and unity. The spirit must come to terms with the fact that its true essence is not the finite personality, but an immortal, timeless spark of the divine, an integral part of a vast, continuous chain of life. The supreme act of liberation, which the higher spirits call inner freedom, is the ability to stand serene and recognized beyond all physical appearances. This requires the spirit to consciously dismantle the ego's creation, the carefully curated self-image, and embrace its true self as a being of consciousness and love. The true work, therefore, begins in life, understanding that the roles we play are merely temporary assignments meant to teach us love and humility, not defining attributes meant to be clung to eternally. By practicing this self-recognition, the spirit learns that even as the roles of parent, professional, or friend dissolve, the essential spiritual thread, the capacity for love, and the sum of moral acquisitions remains, ensuring that the soul departs with the serene certainty that its essence is eternal and indestructible. The deeply ingrained need for control represents a pervasive and often unrecognized form of spiritual imprisonment that must be released for a peaceful transition. Human existence is characterized by an almost obsessive desire to dictate the terms of life, to manage outcomes, to schedule every event, and to resist any disruption to a meticulously planned rhythm. This controlling impulse springs from a deep-seated lack of trust in the higher benevolent order of the universe. When faced with the undeniable power of death, which operates entirely outside of human will, the controlling spirit suffers immensely. The inability to define when, how, or if the process occurs causes immense anxiety and resistance, transforming the peaceful transition into a desperate, exhausting struggle against the inevitable flow of natural law. Furthermore, this controlling impulse manifests in an obsession with time. On Earth, we are slaves to the clock, defining our lives in finite measurements, hours, deadlines, and decades, which creates a profound psychological limitation. In the spiritual realm, however, time is purely a matter of perception and vibration. The departing spirit that remains tethered to the earthly concept of chronological time experiences significant confusion and suffering, trying to comprehend the nature of eternity, with a mind still shackled by the clock. The ultimate liberation, therefore, is the profound act of delivery or entrustment. It is the spirit's final acknowledgement that life in all its myriad forms and planes follows a purpose and a design far grander, wiser, and more loving than any individual mind can fully grasp. Kardec insisted that true submission to God's will is not passive resignation, but an active, intelligent confidence that the processes of life and death are guided by infinite love, not capricious chance. By consciously renouncing the human need to manage, define, and regulate the process of their departure, the spirit finds immediate rest. The transition ceases to be a traumatic event and becomes a gentle, natural movement, guided by spiritual friends and the deep, reassuring current of love. The soul discovers that in releasing the reins of control, it is not losing power, but gaining the boundless freedom that comes from absolute trust in the universal order. One of the most paradoxical and challenging forms of bondage the spirit must release is the subtle, self-imposed attachment to suffering and the ingrained habit of victimization. There are souls who, whether through a chronic sense of injustice, unaddressed self-pity, or a desperate need to feel wronged, become psychologically and energetically tethered to their own past pains and grievances. They carry the narrative of their wounds as a defining characteristic, revisiting and reliving the scenes of their sorrow, as if they could somehow still alter or mitigate the outcome. This mental and emotional clinging to pain keeps the soul permanently suspended in the dense, dark vibrations of the past, unable to perceive the light of growth and opportunity that surrounds it. These souls often depart the physical body still enveloped in shadows, generated entirely by their own repetitive, suffering thoughts. The crucial philosophical breakthrough the spirit must achieve is the profound understanding that no pain is ever truly in vain. Every experience of hardship, every loss, and every period of deep sorrow is not a cruel, meaningless accident, but a purposefully designed, intense, educational lesson for the soul's necessary growth. When the spirit can look back at its suffering and recognize the specific lesson it brought, the strengthening of patience, the cultivation of empathy, the necessity of humility, the entire nature of the experience transforms. The weight that was once crippling pain instantly transmutes into invaluable permanent wisdom. This wisdom is the single most valuable asset the spirit carries across the threshold. To let go of this attachment to suffering means to stop framing oneself as a victim and to embrace the role of a conscious student of life's trials. It is the courageous acceptance that the event served its function, the lesson has been learned, and the time for dwelling in the pain is over. By making this cognitive and emotional shift, the spirit breaks the loop of self-pity, releases the chains of the past, and ensures that it steps into the new life not as a wounded survivor, but as a seasoned soul equipped with profound experiential knowledge, ready to move forward unburdened and free. The bonds of affection are fundamentally spiritual and eternal, yet even love, when corrupted by earthly possessiveness, can become a spiritual prison the soul must consciously dismantle. True love, as taught by Kardec, is a sublime force that inherently liberates, inspires, and elevates all parties involved. However, when this pure emotion is twisted into dependency, a feeling of ownership over another soul, or an intense, debilitating fear of separation, it creates a powerful anchor to the physical plane. Countless spirit accounts reveal souls who, driven by a desperate, misguided love, refuse to follow the light, lingering near their grieving families. They fear that their existence will cease for their loved ones the moment they depart, or they feel an overwhelming need to protect or control the survivors' lives. This emotional entanglement, though rooted in love, often becomes a source of imbalance and stagnation for both the living and the departed. This unwholesome, dependent love is a form of spiritual selfishness, preventing the departed soul from pursuing its necessary growth and inadvertently draining the energy of those it attempts to cling to. The ultimate act of detachment in this sphere is the spiritual realization that love transcends all physical planes and proximity. True affection does not demand physical presence or constant interaction. It exists as a pure, harmonious, spiritual attunement or communion that operates regardless of the veil of matter. the spirit must learn to trust in the wisdom of the divine plan for its loved ones, accepting that each soul has its own path and its own timetable for growth and reunion. By consciously choosing to bless and release those who remain, desiring their well-being even from a distance, the spirit breaks the chain of physical dependency. It realizes that the bond of true, liberated love remains intact and eternal, manifesting as a subtle, pervasive good influence rather than a possessive, draining attachment. This transformation from clinging to liberating love is a monumental step, granting the spirit the final, profound peace required to follow the guides and begin its own necessary journey of purification and further evolution. The final, essential act of unburdening before the spirit can fully awaken in the light is the discarding of all limiting judgments, especially those directed inward in the form of crippling self-condemnation. Many souls, influenced by rigid earthly doctrines or their own perfectionist ideals, approach death terrified of facing a wrathful external divine judge prepared to inflict eternal punishment. This perception of God as a severe, vengeful entity is a profound limiting belief that must be released. Kardec emphasized a critical spiritual truth. God does not punish. God is justice and love. The suffering experienced by the disincarnate spirit is not an arbitrary sentence, but simply the natural, immediate consequence, the spiritual reaping of the seeds sown during the physical life, a reflection of the soul's own internal moral state. The spirit is its own most severe judge. Therefore, the most urgent work is the spirit's reconciliation with its own imperfections. The soul that has been overly critical of others, or that has relentlessly judged and condemned itself for not achieving an unrealistic standard of perfection, must learn the vital lesson of self-forgiveness. This is a powerful, liberating act in the spiritual realm, dissolving the heavy shadows of chronic guilt and opening the pathway toward necessary moral repair and spiritual renewal. It requires the spirit to release the rigidity of its human judgment and embrace the divine patience and unconditional love. Furthermore, the spirit must release the human tendency to judge events and people as absolutely good or bad. It must understand that every encounter, every loss and every challenge had a necessary educational purpose, a reason linked to its greater developmental trajectory. By discarding these rigid, dualistic and self-punishing beliefs, the spirit frees itself from the cycle of self-flagellation and allows the pure light of truth to enter its consciousness. This act of spiritual intellectual honesty permits the soul to view its entire past life not as a record of failures to be punished, but as a rich tapestry of lessons to be learned, ensuring it steps across the threshold with the calmness of acceptance and the lightness of a soul prepared for eternal growth. The totality of what the spirit must release before its return to the spiritual plane is ultimately a comprehensive renunciation of the illusions of matter and the flaws of the ego. The hour of departure is, as Allan Kardec affirmed, a perfect mirror of the life that was lived. The soul that spent its time grasping fiercely at transient wealth, consumed by ego and resentment, and blinded by the fear of change, experiences the spiritual transition as a painful, agonizing extraction, a state of profound confusion and intense suffering caused solely by its own resistance. Conversely, the spirit that diligently cultivated detachment, practiced genuine love, sought reparation for its errors, and lived with an awareness of the continuity of existence, finds the passage to be a gentle, anticipated awakening, a profound repose deserved after the labor of the earthly schoolroom. The journey of liberation culminates in the absolute realization that nothing of true value is ever lost. The essential nature of the soul, the wisdom it acquired, the goodness it practiced, the love it radiated, accompanies it permanently. It is only the temporary shells, the physical body, the social titles, the material possessions, and the heavy emotional dross of pride, fear, and grudge that are left behind. The spirit that has successfully achieved this multifaceted detachment is immediately greeted by serene, loving spiritual guides and family, enveloped in a light that is profoundly familiar, as it is the same light of love that guided it throughout life. Though it was often unseen, this profound moment of awakening confirms the truth. The suffering of death is not a castigation from God, but a self-created torment born of clinging. The spirit realizes that the only way to truly live eternally is to practice letting go daily. By willingly shedding fear, pride, and the illusion of separation, the spirit finally achieves its intended state: peace, unconditional love, and the boundless freedom to continue its evolution as a liberated child of the divine. The final breath, then, is not an ending, but the first deep, expansive breath within the infinity of its true, eternal home.